to St. Luke, the 17th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave, who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you rather not say to him, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron, and serve me while I eat and drink? Later you may eat and drink.' Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Christ.
Please be seated. There are those times during our lives when we look at the state of the world around us, or maybe it's some challenge that we are facing ourselves, and we may find ourselves crying out to the Lord, "How long, O Lord, do I have to deal with this? How long, O Lord, until you take care of this struggle and this mess that surrounds me?" This, in ancient terms, is known as a lament. And the Bible is filled with all sorts of occasions where people of faith, as they are in distress, as they look at the challenges and the difficulties of the world around them, cry out to the Lord in a lament. From Lamentations to Habakkuk in our Old Testament lesson, to Jesus himself as he was entering into Jerusalem to die on the cross, the Bible is filled, and the history of the church is filled with people of faith lamenting to the Lord the state of things and how they are. And I would argue that crying out to the Lord in distress, crying out in lamentation to the Lord, is a vital and necessary part of our faith journey and our walk with God. Now, as we look at the world today, as I look at the world today, there is a lot to lament. There's a lot to cry out to the Lord in distress, asking when the Lord's going to do something. As I live my life personally in my faith, and then as I live professionally as a pastor, I constantly find myself walking around shaking my head, wondering where things are headed. I lament that we live in a national and political climate today that is so divisive that it has become hostile, and we cannot speak civilly to one another when it comes to the differing issues that so often divide us, and we have leaders over us who can't find a way to come together to work for the common good of society to make sure that things might move in the right direction and get a little better. I lament that the value of human life has been devalued because of this culture of violence and the way that we like to glorify the violence that surrounds us. I lament that in some places taxes have become so oppressive that our children are moving away from the states that they've called their home to new and strange places just so they can have a chance of making ends meet. I lament that we seem to have a lack of coping skills among people today that's led to rampant abuse of all types, from substance abuse to abuses of the body to all sorts of other challenges and addictions and things that are not healthy. I lament that the church in recent history has broken the trust of way too many people and completely intensified and multiplied this falling away from organized religion that has gone on around us because the church has broken trust. And I lament that because of this, because of these sins committed by the church and her leaders and servants, that over the course of my ministry for the last 25 years, how I be a pastor has changed. I have to spend more time now doing legally obligated administrative things than doing the things that a pastor should be doing. So what about you? What causes you as you walk around to shake your head or even shake your fist, asking that question, how long, O Lord? How much longer do I have to put up with this? In our gospel lesson, the apostles came up to Jesus and asked, increase our faith. This comes on the heels of Jesus telling the stories that we've heard the last 2 Sundays, the parable of the unmerciful servant and the parable of the rich man who runs rampant all over poor Lazarus and doesn't care for him. And as the apostles are hearing this, as they're walking along, I'm sure this has increased their sense of anxiety about being a disciple and following the Lord. I am sure that this request of Jesus to increase their faith is really a lament from their heart. They are worried about and concerned that they're going to fall into those same pitfalls of the things that Jesus talked about in those stories as they're walking around. So it is a request that makes sense. Increase our faith, Lord, so we don't make the same mistakes. Yet, Jesus' response to them is disappointing. He tells the story of the mustard seed. Now let me set the stage a little bit for you as Jesus tells this story. When we went to the Holy Land a couple years ago, we had the opportunity to walk to the old city of Jerusalem by the path that goes by the old gate. And it comes down from the side of Jerusalem where the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane are. And to walk this path, you walk through many, many trees. And yet as you get closer and closer to the city, as you're walking the path to the gate, all of a sudden as you come out of the trees, you come across these yellow weed-like plants that are just marking each side of the path. The type of thing you would just step on and keep on moving. They were mustard plants. And so there's the contrast. Jesus is walking along through the shade of the trees, the olive trees, the fruit trees, everything that surrounds them that provides for their needs. And as he comes out of that, after telling these stories about the unmerciful servant, the rich man, and Lazarus, he then sees these weed-like little yellow plants. He says, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to the big mulberry tree, be uprooted and gone into the sea, and it will do what you request. Certainly not an endorsement to increase their faith. And then he goes on to talk about slaves and their obligations and their responsibilities. That you don't praise them for doing what they're supposed to do, doing their job. And the point that Jesus is making is that faith is not something that is measurable according to worldly standards. Faith is a relationship that locks us into God, whereby God's going to do what God needs to do for us in order for us to get through life and the things that cause us to cry out to him. Martin Luther once talked about faith as being our wedding ring that pledges us to God. A wedding ring does not a marriage make. Couples who have the cheapest of all wedding rings have just as much a chance of being married 50 years as couples who have very rich and ostentatious wedding rings. The point being that faith is this connection to God that even in its smallest, simplest, and weakest form sets us all on the road to the same place and the same path. And it gives us all the same promise that when we cry out to the Lord in our frustrations and our distress, God is with us, and God may even do things that surprise and amaze us. Sometimes as we look at these things that we lament in life, we look at the troubles of the world around us, they seem to be huge and overwhelming. But God's promise and assurance to us, especially as we hear these readings today, is that even the simplest of faith And the tiniest act of God is greater. So it's okay to cry out in distress. It's okay to lament the things that aren't right in the world, the things that frustrate you. As a matter of fact, I believe it's at those moments that we are conditioned in our faith to look where we need to look. Because as we see the struggles of the world, it causes us to tune in more to God, to how God works, to what God is saying, to see that God never abandoned us, and God does for us what we need. And this gift of faith is not some magical formula that we have to figure out and seek and find. It is who we are and what we have as the baptized children of God. That's why Habakkuk, as he cried out to the Lord, could still assure the people that the righteous live by their faith. That's why Paul, as he's coaching and he's encouraging young Pastor Timothy, he can say to him, guard this treasure given to you and let the Holy Spirit work through you. And that's why Jesus answered the apostles' question the way he did in the gospel lesson. And that's our assurance today. Whether you think you have great faith or you think you're struggling in your faith, God's with you. And God will help you when you cry out to him.